segment, which include the various aspects of the environment. So I'll try to give a brief introduction to each of the experts. Professor Hiku, he is basically an engineer turned development researcher. Currently serves as professor at SPIESR. Basically, his research is noted for the conceptualizing the framework for sustainable development indicators and developing alternative methods to measure human development and energy performance. So that's actually, they all are so, their achievement is such a big, I have 2 to 3 days each will cover, so I'll try to make it as small as possible. Then we have Professor Ashil Mehta. He is basically work focuses on the governance, not merely how policies are drafted, but how they are behave once implemented. He is professor at State of Economics at MS University with over 32 years of academic and research experience. He also served as an invited expert for National Biodiversity Authority, Government of India, on the economic evaluation of bioresources. Then we have Dr. Smita Pradhan. She is bringing an essential civic dimension to this discussion. Her work in river ecology, environment advocacy, institutional accountability remind us that the environment degradation is not an abstract, but it is directly affecting the community, each of us. Her achievement basically, it is a lot, but basically what I think is very interesting is significant achievement, which is serving as the lead petitioner in a landmark National Green Tribunal in the case of successful halting the 300 crore Vishwamitri Riverfront Development Project, thereby protecting the critical habitat of a mugger crocodile. Then I welcome you, ma'am. Then I'm introducing Dr. Sagar Marathe. When discussing on air pollution, it becomes emotional because we have gone through this even the last year, we had air pollution, we have even in Delhi. So basically, he's an academician, but at the same time, beyond the academic research, Dr. Marathe is certified ISO lead auditor, serving as an internal auditor for institutional sustainability. So I welcome you, sir. Then I introduce Dr. Anurag Srivastava. His academic work engaged deeply with sustainability modeling and policy framework, especially challenging the growth from environment stress. He is from PDU basically, and as of now, he is currently lead to 99 lakh ISR project on disaster readiness. I welcome you, sir. Then we have a pleasure to introduce Dr. Bharat Jain. If the environmental economics speaks about internalization, externalization, professionally, Dr. Jain builds the infrastructure that make it possible. His global influence is marked by his role as a UNIDO representative for the Asia Pacific and his contribution to international sustainability dialogue across more than 20 countries. So we have the academician, we have the experts, and we have the practitioner who will be able to give an outline about the various aspects of environment, specifically focusing on the 4 major themes which is part of this workshop. So it is talking about the environment policy, then we are talking about how the solid waste is being managed and the circular economy. At the same time, we are also focusing on the core issues of air and water pollution. So each of the expert is working since many years on the specific areas. So we are, so ma'am, Vijaya ma'am is the chairperson, obviously, and we have heard her. So she will be now taking care of the whole panel. Ma'am, take it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oram, for giving me this opportunity. Experts in their own domains. So we have had a discussion in the previous session, and I will cherish that discussion. always, and this issue of cultivating a greener tomorrow. This is the topic which is being given to all of us. And if I look at this cultivating a greener tomorrow, which means that we have a tomorrow. If you try to introspect it, so you have tomorrow which has to be greener, and we need to cultivate a little bit. And tomorrow, it means that the path of development, the path of growth which we are taking, right? The kind of path which we are taking at the same time, the fabric which we are weaving, this fabric of development, fabric of growth which we are weaving, can integrate or rather can make it much more greener. And here in this discussion, as we are having colleagues having expertise in different domains, Dr. SPIESR has got internalizing expertise, Madam is about economics, and so on and so forth. We will be able to delve into much more deeper into the sectoral issues, particularly Gujarat and India. So, we have been having issues and challenges of economic degradation in each and every kind of areas, and damages are happening across. So without any my getting into the issues, I request Dr. Rasid, you will go first.
As for the
Or as per Dr. Ripu. Dr. Ripu will go first. Integrated waste management in circular economy. Yeah. So we will be having 15 to 20 minutes presentation and talk, and then we will be later on question answer, right, combined there. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so very good morning to all of you, and sorry, good afternoon. And thank you, Dr. Forum, and congratulations to SPIESR for this event. So this is extremely important, as ma'am has already pointed out. So since I am doing the first, the opening battle, any opening battle, you see, you have always, yesterday you must have heard the math of what SPIESR Ahmedabad. So sometimes you are confused whether to hit or defend, because there is a chance of getting out also in zero. But what I plan to do is basically to, when I was giving the topic of that, how do we integrate waste management into the circular economy? So one of the things what came to my mind, what presently I am researching, is to basically howsoever integration we might do in the process. Howsoever, for example, I do work in the sector of energy, like we are all been talking about renewable energy. Howsoever renewable energy you bring in, you would not be able to get out of the cycle of this waste generation until unless we reduce our consumption. I think some of the discussion earlier session was related to that. So I would more go into the idea of prevention rather than going into the same problem and trying to work out what can we do to solve that problem. So in that sense, I will try to go beyond circular economy. Circular economy, as all of us understand, is something where you are not leaving into chances. You are basically making it by design that you are able to extract the ultimate value of the product. In the sense, when you are discarding a product, you are also making an industrial design so that that product value could be utilized. So if you see, instead of going in a very linear, extractive, resource intensive economy, you are trying to make use of the product in some way or the other. So the idea is to basically reuse, repair, recover, remanufacture and regenerate products and materials at the end of its service value. So when we talk of all this, actually we are indirectly talking about a lot of other things. That means, when we are saying, for example, reusing thing or repairing thing, so are you really getting that scope, getting that opportunity? So my discussion will be mostly floating around those topics of increasing the longevity of human artifacts, which generally are valued. But if you see that the world has become such that actually longevity is a problem for the capitalist economy, because the things which will be consumed and consumed fast. This is an example. Few years ago, we used to have bigger bottles with more water, right? Per plastic, you need plastic. But you see this size has reduced. You might have seen in the last few years it was a little bigger, but now the size has further reduced. So it is basically a classic example of how you reduce the longevity. Do you remember last time when you used a pen and the refill was over? Okay, you tend to, and you can change the refill, even you don't get the refill. In my childhood, I remember we used to get refill in the stationery shop. But nowadays you go and ask for a refill, you will not get the refill. So that is exactly the economy currently we are. So if you are trying to be in the same economy and trying to do whatever you want to do, I was talking about renewable energy, for example, you get all your pens manufactured renewable energy, doesn't matter. Because the way we have gone into overconsumption is something which will hit us, at some point in time. Like for example, some people were talking about Ahmedabad traffic also. However number of flyovers you might build, until or unless you have the strategy to reduce personal vehicles, you are just shifting the traffic from one square to the other, or one time point to the other. 5 years down the line, again the same square will have congestion which you might have avoided temporarily by building a flyover. So the point is, if you are really interested in reducing the waste, we have to target differently. So what should be our target? So I will basically, so that's how I think the first line of the slide is missing. So I'm basically talking about certain foundational strategy to basically integrate waste management into circular economy. And those foundational strategy, one of the things would be the targeting correctly. So, for example, our idea of considering development equivalent to GDP, so that is where the first problem is. So when we are talking about GDP, that is what our target should be, but any undergraduate economist would know that GDP has a lot of problems. Waste itself is actually, if you see, if any, because GDP considers only the economic value, it doesn't consider the environmental consequences. Even if you are trying to rope in those consequences within the GDP, but if you are not going to go out of the GDP to something radical like, for example, genuine progress indicator, you talk about maybe genuine saving, you talk about green GDP, you talk about environmentally adjusted GDP, you talk about maybe various other indicators which UN has come out with, along with this systematic that environmental economic accounting is. Unless we do that, but that we have not done. Unless we go to an indicator like GNH, which our neighboring Bhutan does. Bhutan actually assesses its progress through gross national happiness. If you see the metric of gross national happiness, it would have 9 domains, and within one domain, every domain is equally weighted. Within one domain, which has 3 parameters, so one of the parameters is per capita income. So if you see the per capita income does figure in the gross national happiness, but the weight it gets is only 1 by 27. So in Bhutan, for example, Bhutan is not the happiest country, by the way. Many people think that, but Bhutan measures its progress through happiness. But happiness is not how happy you are. This is not the question which is asked. It is based on cultural, social, governance, ecological factors. It is also based on how much time you work and how much time you relax. Both taking accounted, because as you know, GDP will be blind to how much time you relax, because GDP will be always overwork. You actually add to the GDP. So leisure is something which would not be accounted in GDP. I remember Bertrand Russell's famous book or famous essay in praise of idleness, because he was basically, trying to, the British government's ideas of making people overwork. So he was basically saying, and at the same time having a lot of unemployment, to have an efficient kind of economy, he was countering that. And it is worthwhile to actually make people work hard, but make all the people work rather than making it away. So basically, as you say, you know, he is basically coming from not in the sense of not understanding economics, not understanding efficiency at all, but from the point of view that actually slavery persisted for generations and years together only because of the notion of that work is worship and idle mind is devil's workshop. I mean, idleness is good. If unless you're idle, probably an idle mind stands the chance of being creative. If you're always busy, probably you will not be. Right? So from that point of view, you see the GDP has a problem. If you see the GDP actually, you know, wastage. If there is a polluting activity, all of us might know this. When there is a polluting activity, it basically adds to the GDP twice for the pollution as well as the pollution abatement. So, like crime increases, GDP increases, divorce increases, GDP increases, natural hazards increases, GDP has this problem. I'm not saying GDP is all bad, but it has certain problem. And we are targeting GDP, not only just we in India. It is all over the world, country after country. You know, we basically target GDP. So that basically it is not accounting the damage of the assets resulting from pollution. So no negative consequence of waste generation. So that is what. So instead of GDP, if you look at GPI, I'm just giving you an example how GPI is constructed. If you see GPI actually takes account of the social cost. I think ma'am was mentioning about the social aspect of any production system. Loss of leisure time, loss of commuting, loss of crime, loss of underemployment and unemployment. So these are basically accounted. Same as the environmental cost. You know, GDP doesn't account for anything which is not participating in the market. Like for example, activities done by women in the households, voluntary work is not exactly accounted. So if you see GPI, how does GPI look like? I mean, there is a famous graph which is having the GPI of US versus GDP of US. As you could see, the GDP is on the rise, but the GDP, from the year 1950, in fact, also the year which is roughly considered as the starting year of the Anthropocene epoch. I mean, of course, people don't agree much about it, but a bit degree of agreement that from 1950 onwards, you see, there has been an increase in the sort of human resources of planet Earth. And if you see, there is a fall in the GPI. So GPI is intended to provide citizens and policymakers with a more accurate barometer of the overall health of the economy and how our national condition is changing over time. And if the mood of the public is any barometer at all, then it would seem that the GPI comes much closer than the GDP explaining it. That is why people feel increasingly gloomy despite official claims of economic progress and prosperity. Right. So this is, so it is extremely important that we should go to something more holistic, like a gross national happiness or to GPI. If you don't do that, and we do everything else to have value out of the waste and integrate it to the economy to get. So another example is genuine saving, which actually account for the damage which is not visible. I'm sorry about it. The damage from the CO2 and the particulate matter. So if those things are not considered in your gross national saving, then obviously you will not account for it. So that is something which is a pollution damage. Okay, so that resource depletion, which also ma'am spoke about. I mean,
Professor Jiku, sorry, I would like to see the previous slide, PPI indicator.
Sure.
The previous one. Yes. Just for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, we basically consumption way of calculating the GDP, and then from personal consumption it basically adds and deducts. The next point, which actually also ma'am mentioned about in the introduction, I mean, the growth. I think we have a problem in the growth itself, because what is the growth we are talking about? Because of the GDP, right? So once we have mistargeted something and we are talking about growth, is again problematic, because if we see, I mean, there was a paper in 2018-19 by if I remember correctly, which basically talked about degrowth. I mean, degrowth, a radical theory of abundance. I mean, if you think about growth, so growth has a problem of, which basically comes from the idea of Lauderdale paradox, which is basically, if you want to talk about two kinds of resources, be it about public goods and private riches. Now, those two resources come in opposite to each other. If you want to increase one, I was talking about transportation. If you want to increase private transportation, just do one thing. Make choke the public transportation. People have to automatically go for private vehicles, and it will increase your GDP. It will increase your growth. So if you see private riches to increase, what basically what happens is basically we need to have the induced scarcity within us. In the sense, that's what the advertisers do. That's what the marketing people do. That the business school students are being trained on. That how do you basically market things where even though the need is not there sometimes. Like you might be okay with a semi-automatic washing machine, as we say, but then you will be told that, well, that is a fully automatic washing machine or something tomorrow might come pressed or clothes will come out of those machines and things like that, which you might have actually using a semi-automatic and quite contented with that because you have also time to probably rinse it or whatever, dry it, and you are getting some sunlight and you have some activity and something or the other. I'm just trying to say, so this is what we see every day. Like with a mobile phone, it's the same thing. There is a front camera, there is a rotating camera, there is a flapping phone. All that basically is told to us that is what we call, which you understand in economics or the other resource literature is that induced scarcity or artificial scarcity. So the growth, let's understand this very first point. Growth starts on scarcity. So until there is scarcity, so this scarcity to be, so now I also mentioned about the consumers. The consumer need to take responsibility. I do also believe consumers are the elephant in the room. If the consumers recognize this, that we are being manipulated in the process, then actually the problem, because the producers are also rightly saying that in response to some question, that producer will not probably do it because producers will be always having to willing to maximize the profit. I think that was a question also which was asked. So the point is, this is what is happening. So if you see, we are talking about circular economy which talks about reuse and repair. Are you able to do it? If you take your mobile phone to a shop and say that when the screen is not working, you get a no, this particular model is not available, screen cost will be too much, why don't you same cost with an EMI, why can't you take a new phone? That is what we call as planned obsolescence. So growth starts on planned obsolescence. The point is, since the production is happening, because the producers, including the great industrialists who have 27-floor houses, etc., they would have few more such houses across the globe, and that is the reason their wants are unlimited, and therefore the production is actually rising. And as all of us will very commonsensically understand, a production can be sustained how? Suppose today I produce X amount, tomorrow also I want to produce X, or day after tomorrow I want to make it 2X. How can I do that? I do that by increasing the consumption. Until this consumption will not happen, my production cannot be sustained. So that is the reason people are pushed towards actually consuming more. And that's where the discounted price, the delayed payment, all those credit cards, all this actually system is based on the idea of making you to consume more. And if you consume more, obviously the waste would be more. If you consume more, like for example, I come from Anand. Anand doesn't have a public bus. Obviously people will have their private vehicles. And people will have their private vehicles. Howsoever integration into circular economy you do, there will be scraps. Okay, so that is the whole point. That the consumption has to go less. And this is something which I started with saying that which is actually. So the solution is, what I would like to mention here is to move towards sufficiency. That is what is a very recent concept, because efficiency has not, that is what in the production system, all the time we are talking about, I am extracting certain value from the discarded mobile phone. I am trying to make the system efficient, but efficiency has not delivered. Efficiency has not delivered all throughout. So if you see efficiency, what was the efficiency formula? Output by input, right? You would have expected that things becoming more efficient, the primary resource consumption would have gone down. But which has not happened. things have become efficient. As we are speaking also things have become efficient. Extraction of, like I work in the energy sector, so I have looked at the mining for example, the extraction of coal has become efficient, transportation of coal has become efficient, power production, supercritical thermal power production has become efficient, transmission and distribution system has become more efficient, and finally the devices have become more efficient, the lighting systems that we have, or any other electronic or electrical devices we have. But if you see the total primary consumption of energy, has it come down? Because we targeted efficiency to make the input to go down, but it has not come down. So that's what we are saying efficiency, and that is what I struggle hard to get this graph from a literature which is not visible, which I have mentioned here, is that efficiency, which is actually this is the inverse of that, which is called energy intensity. Energy intensity is coming down throughout, across the country, China, India, whichever country you can look at, US. As it is a continuous process. All the IITs, all the technologies, all those management practices are making processes efficient. Okay, but as the efficiency is increasing, now the question is what is happening to the primary energy consumption. If the primary energy consumption in the energy literature, what we see, the expectation was more like an inverted U. That means you will actually increase your consumption initially because of the avenues of use increasing. Like we keep increasing the avenues of energy. Like yesterday years we are not using escalators to climbing steps or drying hands. We are not using energy, but now you are using energy. So avenues of energy increasing, it will be the energy use will increase, but finally the efficiency will take over and the energy consumption will go down. But that has not happened. I mean, that has happened only in very few and far cases, and also it has not sustained. Okay, so this is a case, for example, where you can see the blue line is basically the total energy, that is the primary energy consumption, which are looking like an inverted U because efficiency is taking over. But those cases are extremely rare. If you look at energy literature, for that matter, any resource literature, what has happened is more like a straight U. So this is the general phenomenon. I mean, if you go to richer families, if you go to richer societies, richer countries, or if you move ahead with time, what has happened is the consumption has increased. And why the consumption has increased? We have already spoke about. We have mistargeted GDP, we have mistargeted the growth in GDP. So we are basically into that cycle too. So this is, I mean, of course, efficiency has its own problem also, which we'll talk about in a moment. But here I would like to say, some people might say that all these resource consumption has increased because of the population rise. That is also, fundamentally in Indian context, we have quadrupled ourselves in 77 years of independence, right? We are 30 odd crores now, I don't know what, 140 plus, right? So we have quadrupled ourselves, but if you see in per capita terms, you normalize it for population. And this is what the total energy consumption, primary energy consumption that is happening since historic times. As you could see, there were attempts of inverted U, but those inverted U are not sustaining because there is overconsumption. There is always induced scarcity, and you are basically going for more and more consumption. So efficiency, of course, first of all, efficiency, why it is happening? One is, there are two reasons. One is efficiency defeats itself partially, because when we tend to use more efficient product, we tend to use it more. More efficient car, we tend to drive it more. More efficient TV, now TV size has become all size. I mean, because CRT monitor TV used not to be used like that. More efficient lighting, more fixtures, you will find more fixtures. So that is one problem, which we call in the natural resource economics as the rebound effect, that you tend to use it more if it is a more efficient thing. The other thing is actually overconsumption. So the whole idea of, I think somebody was mentioning this also post the first session about profit maximization, revenue maximization. I mean, this is what is actually the problem, because there are research which says that all the primary resource consumption has increased because of the rebound effect. Rebound effect only contribute roughly 1/7 of that. But the larger part of it is basically coming from the maximization idea. I mean, one of the sustainability theories comes from this idea of spatial economy. I mean, you may able to, I'm just putting it because you could easily to relate to it. Assume yourself that you are in a spaceship and you have to use resources. How do you use resources? You are using, for example, water or tissue paper. You will be using minimally, right? You will be using minimally, thinking that here when you are using resources, we are trying to use it maximally. So that is where is the main problem. And that is that is a point we are saying in the energy domain also. When we are currently working, we are using a framework which have actually modified a bit. We have to use it less. First and foremost thing is using less. When I am giving my for example, giving a CRT monitor TV to your housemate, when you are going for a bigger TV, for example, actually we are calling ourselves to be the smart user because we have a 5-star TV. But that's not the point. Because we are using more energy, we should not be called the smart. Even that inefficient TV is using less energy. I think first and foremost thing, using less. So that is the prime sufficiency, and then efficiency, whatever you are using, and what you might be using as a resource is the variable. So I just make two last points, just 2 points, ma'am. So one is, if you want to do it in a personal level, so let's think about how do you conserve or prevent waste generation at a micro as well as a macro level. At a micro level, obviously, there has been literature on sufficiency which basically talks about, this is where, where we say that the overconsumption, the voluntary overconsumption, imposed underconsumption is actually the crux of the problem. The productivism and the consumerism is the crux of the problem. So how do you use less? One of the things is we recently did a survey in Anand in terms of can we have sufficiency slabs as we have efficiency star, and sort of nudge the consumer to using a sufficient device rather than going for a more efficient but large device. Okay, so that's what we did, and we categorized consumer into 4 categories: efficient, sufficient, excess, inefficient, and sufficient, inefficient. And that where we basically, when we surveyed, we got, we just started this 35 households are surveyed about these categories, and then we actually got sufficient, efficient, and the people who are mindful consumers. Sufficient, efficient are the ones which are basically what are not able to, like the housemate example I gave. So sufficient device, less consumption, but inefficient. Excess efficient, these are basically the ones who are getting affected by the rebound effect. You can call them ordinary consumers. And the ones which are mindless, who are excess and inefficient. So these are the ones which we are doing. The second point I would like to mention is how to do it in a macro level, reducing waste at a macro level. That you can do obviously, what can do, this is my last slide. So, like for example, the city of Bogota did, where the 2 mayors, who is currently the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro and Enrico, who sort of followed him as the Bogota mayor in the early 2000s. They basically, what they did is, they basically applied the Rotterdam paradox. Though 60% of the Colombian rich stay in Bogota, they went ahead, took the risk of getting impeached, took the risk of actually expanding public goods. They expanded because they had to do like this. If you are going in a car, one person, so basically bus is carrying 60%, that means 60 times more space, that means bus needs a separate lane, as Ahmedabad also does partially have. So what they did was, not only that, good footpath, because that is what people will take to the buses, and that's why expansion of public goods and economies actually led to a situation where the GDP might fall. Obviously, you will actually not get so much of automobile sector might have a downhill, the oil sector might have downhill. That's exactly US that is the US will find those who have experienced public transportation is not so strong because of the oil lobby and the automobile lobby. So if you want to do it at a macro level, I think right to repair as a fundamental right should emerge. We cannot be told when I buy a mobile phone in 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, we cannot be told that this mobile is non-repairable after 2 years. I have to change my mobile. So the right to repair, those of want to change, that is fine. And that basically at the end of the end is consumer, as I said, consumer is the real master. If the consumer realizes that there is a pride in biking, not going in an SUV or a bigger car, then obviously the situation will change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shukul, for giving very nice presentation. You touched upon the circular economy and the prevention and interestingly genuine progress indicators, and very interestingly you could come out with those I really like those efficiency framework, and it was quite nice, and he's doing the work on it. And thanks to Government of India as well, because Government of India has now taken a decision to, to calculate its GDP, not on the basis of GDP itself, what he emphasized, but on the basis of net GDP, taking into account of all the negatives and the positives. So this year itself, the Government of India will be, doing it. So it was very interesting, your presentation and talk, and I'm sure that we will be there. We are going to learn from this particular efficiency framework. I'm going to learn a lot. Now I invite Dr. Mehta. Dr. Mehta from MS University. So looking forward to Dr. Mehta's talk, and we'll be learning from you, learning some Gujarat experiences.
Good afternoon, all of you. I actually consider myself to be an outlier here because I'm not a practicing economist. I'm more of an academician, more of a theory man, so to say. I'm more into theoretical concepts, and it's because the sub-theme of the workshop is intersection of economic policy and major environmental challenges. The whole idea is how do we amalgamate, or how do we intersperse the economic policy with solving environmental issues. And for that it is very, very important, and since we have a majority of student audience here, I would actually also target students in understanding some of the basic concepts. Ma'am has already touched in the morning, so I was a bit relieved that certain concepts were already put forth to the audience. I'll probably elaborate on them a little more. So basically we're talking about how you can just ignore this. How do we integrate the environmental policy with in solving environmental issues? Always remember that policy decisions do not come from the air. They are not come from heaven. Policies always will require the theoretical basis for you to formulate strategies. When we talk about carbon credit, or when we talk about some kind of a cooperative behavior amongst certain agents of production and consumers, you need to have a solid foundation for a logical formulation of a strategy or a policy. And that is what I intend to do presently. I have some related slides also if anyone wants an exposition and a detailed exposition of certain concepts that I'll be talking about. Ma'am responded in the morning about producers not willing to bear the cost of reducing the negative externality and instead passing it on to the consumers. Now, there's a very famous, in theory, there's a very famous debate that has still not been solved, so to say. The polluter pay versus the pollutee pay principle. Now, there is this debate. I mean, who pays for any kind of environmental improvement? Should it be the polluter who pays for it, or should it be the pollutee, or the one who benefits from environmental reduction in environmental degradation? Who should pay for it? Now here comes the theory where you must understand the concept of a victim. We know that a victim is somebody who has to be compensated for any kind of, has to be given some kind of a reparation for any kind of a disaster that he encounters or suffers. So you have the definition of victim. Internalizing externality, and by the way, before I digress too much, externalities actually are at the core of any environmental problem. Now, what do we mean by an externality? Probably this will not be visible. Anyway, you see, externality, if I have to define externality, basically externality is when, my production or consumption choices enter your production or consumption choices without your willing it. And without, if it's a negative externality, then you're not being compensated for it. Okay? So there is an example probably, the top slide is PowerPoint. I think the PowerPoint probably is missed out, so we just take care of some technical issue about it. So when A's production or consumption system enter B's production consumption choice without B's wanting it or willing it, is when you say it's an externality. I'm giving an example of two people, one is a smoker, the other is a non-smoker. This is pure theory, okay? Just so you understand. A is a smoker and B is not. The utility functions are given. A's utility is from a basket of commodities like X and Z, where Z is a cigarette that he smokes, because he is a smoker. B's utility also depends on the basket of goods X and Q, where Q is a function of Z. Now mind you, this is something which you need to know. Q is determined by Z, which means that B has no control over Q. Ultimately, the Q is decided by how much of Z A consumes. Okay? The utilities, the change in utilities are given. The black one, the change in utility of B due to the change in Q is actually negative. That is what we mean by externality. My utility decreases by your consumption of additional cigarettes. Okay, now that is what an externality is all about. Pollution is the biggest externality that we find in the real world. So who pays for that pollution? Should it be the one who is polluting, or should it be the one who is going to benefit from pollution reduction? Now that whole concept of victim does not change if you set laws, something like property rights. You say that, okay, now since past so many years we have this whole rule, the law that you can't smoke in public places. Probably 15-20 years back we did not have this explicit law. I could smoke anywhere, everywhere that I wanted. Now you have an explicit law that states I cannot smoke in a public place. So yes, there is a property right that is created. Ordinary consumers and ordinary people are now given the right. What is the property here? It's the clean air. That's the property. Ordinary people are now, non-smokers and ordinary people are now given the rights to clean air. Okay. So, but then at the same time, earlier these ordinary people were victims of my smoking. Okay. Now they are no longer victims because now there is a property right in place. But has this whole concept of victim disappeared? Just because you have put the law, has the whole concept of victim disappeared? Because once the property right is in place and you don't allow me to smoke, I become the victim. Right? So instead of me polluting and paying you for the pollution, you should be paying. Because now I am the victim, you are the beneficiary of the law. Now how far do you justify that? Now how do you solve this issue? And that is where those beautiful theoretical concepts of paradoxality comes in. What is paradoxality? You make any redistribution of resources in a manner that can benefit one person without penalizing any one individual in the economy. So if there is no smoking in public places and the majority of people are benefiting from it, how do you make it Pareto optimal? Just like as you have in airports, you have smoking zones. That makes it now this whole concept of victim disappears. Because now the policy is such where there is an outlet for a smoker also. I can go into the smoking room, smoke 5, 50, 500 cigarettes as much as I want, till I drop dead. Nothing, there's no problem at all. But the point is that now this whole redistribution of resources is now made more Pareto optimal. So polluter versus pollutee pay principle, the debate still goes on. Who pays for that pollution? Anyway, so that was just the concept of externality that I wanted to talk about. Man talked about market failure in the morning. Market failure, just as we have market failure, we also have government failure. In the sense that there are certain government policies which may be distortionary, or certain policy changes may result in further distortions. It is interesting to note, if you divide environmental resources into goods versus bads, if you have environmental goods, you also have environmental bads. Environmental goods are those, or rather goods are those that generate positive externality. Bads are those that generate negative externality. So pollution is an environmental bad. Let's say a shopping complex which has created a basement parking which reduces congestion on the main road is a positive externality. It's an environmental good because it generates positive externality. Now, if you see, generally speaking, public goods are always undersupplied. Public bags will always be oversupplied, as a rule. Why? It is because of this presence of externalities and the fact that we are unable to internalize these externalities. What do we mean by internalization? First of all, understand the concept of internalization. What do we mean by internalization? What it basically means that if it's a negative externality, we try to account for that negative externality, try to put a price on generating that negative externality. You need to put a price on generating negative externality in a manner that now, say, generating pollution must prove costly to the person who is the generator of that negative externality. Or if it's a positive externality, because there's less traffic congestion on the main road, because of shopping complex, created underground, basement, and everything. The general public is also finding not only an amenity that is created, but at the same time a smooth flow of traffic going from A to B. So there is a social benefit. There are others who may not necessarily be using the shopping mall, yet they are finding not only an amenity for future use, there's an option value of that amenity, that they have the possibility of using that resource sometime in the future, fine. But at the same time, they're also finding a free flow of traffic going from place A to place B. But the public is not paying for that resource that is generated. The positive externality that the public is enjoying is not being paid for by the public. Now, therefore, the private producer who has created that shopping mall is actually going to base his price of parking based on the private cost, the cost that is incurred by him. So you go to the underground parking, you want to park your vehicle, probably it's 10 rupees or 20 rupees per vehicle, whatever. That's the price based on the private cost. If the general public was also asked to share or pay for that social benefit that they are enjoying, they share the overall cost of generating that whatever amenity that has been created, such that to that extent the private cost is being shared by not only the private producer but also the general public. So now there is cost sharing. So if this happens, then there will be motivation to create more of such facilities. There will be incentive for other producers, because now the public is also sharing their costs. It will create an incentive for other producers also to create such amenities. As a result, what will happen? The price of that amenity of parking in the underground thing would reduce, because the private cost has reduced. It is now being shared by the public cost. That's why the public goods, what it should be, is Q prime, the right hand side. What we find here. No, this Q prime is what should be supplied, because you see that the supply increases because more producers are induced to create such amenities. Okay? So you have this based on the sharing of the costs by both the private as well as the public, and therefore the price of that parking reduces from P star to P prime, and then you have a greater supply from Q star to Q prime. That is potential. But in reality, you are not able to make the public share the cost of that amenity that is created. Even with that benefit, social benefit that is created, the public is not sharing the cost. Okay? So therefore, the supply remains at Q star and the P also remains at P star. That is what I mean by when I say that public goods are always undersupplied, because the social benefits are not taken into account. The positive externalities are not being internalized. Okay? That is one. Public bags are an easier case to understand actually. As I said, the pollution, the smoking or the pollution. The pollution is creating external costs on the society, on the general public. Okay? Now, therefore, the general public, particularly people who are residing near industrial clusters or industry, they probably might suffer from respiratory issues and bronchitis and asthma and things like that. And therefore, their health expenditure increases. Now, that health expenditure is not being incorporated, it's a social cost that has been imposed on the general public. Now, that social cost is not being considered by the private producer of whatever chemicals or cigarettes or whatever that industry is producing. Therefore, if the cost of the health was also incorporated in the cost of production of the industry, naturally the total cost would increase for the firm. Okay, therefore in this case the supply curve becomes S prime. With that, of course, the price is intended to increase to P prime. Okay. the expectation is that when you impose these kind of taxes on the producer, the expectation is, or the long run expectation is, that the consumers will reduce their demand. And if they reduce their demand, that over a period of time, the firm will produce less. So the idea here is that the potential supply should be Q prime, less should be supplied, because the cost, the social cost is also now being incorporated in the cost of production. That is what we mean by internalization. So that cost is included, therefore the price of the product increases. Okay. Now if I'm getting a pack of cigarettes at 100 rupees, the normal cigarettes that I smoke, if I'm getting it at 100 rupees, probably I'll think about buying it twice price. I'll think twice or thrice for buying it. Therefore, my demand should reduce and the potential supply should come down to Q prime, but that is not what is happening. These kinds of externalities are not being internalized. Okay? Health expenditures for the general public are not being incorporated in the cost of production. Therefore, the supply remains Q star, and the price remains P star. Therefore, public land will always be over supply. Okay, because these externalities are not being internalized. Just see what's next. Okay, this is actually very theoretical. Initially, there was a diagram where I talked about where I have tried to show what are the ways in which we can, what are the instruments that we have at our disposal to internalize the externalities. One category of instruments could be where we have institutionalization of certain environmental friendly behavior. Like what we have just now. During my time, you see, I teach environmental and natural resource economics in my university. I never learned that subject. Because when I was studying, we never had this paper on environmental and natural resource economics. Whatever I know about environmental and natural resource economics is self-study, self-learned. Because I have a passion for the environment, that's the reason. Anyway, now the curriculum includes environmental awareness, understanding of the environmental problems, issues, etc., etc. Therefore, now it has this, the whole study of the environment has become institutionalized. Now we have workshops and seminars on environment. Earlier we did not have environmental economics. Basically, is a very relatively new discipline. It's only in the 70s that it has come up. Okay. So now we have these kinds of workshops and seminars. So institutionalizing basically means that you create a general awareness of the environmental issues and environmental problems, so that people start thinking on how to solve these issues. Just 2 minutes. Okay. I'll speak that. What will be the marketing programs? See that. Okay, that's the question. If anybody wants an exposition, it's there. But for the sake of sticking to the time limit, this is, as I said, as being more of an academician, I am only trying to build on the theory that we have. And you know, if you have any policy suggestions, if I have any policy suggestions to make, it is important and imperative for me to have this basic understanding of the core theory behind how the environmental issues can be incorporated into economics, understanding of economics and the economic discipline. If anyone has any questions, please keep them to you. We will take it up at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mehta, for giving and taking us towards the very theoretical genesis of this environmental policies and discussing about externalities and it was quite interesting to understand that even the victims are to be paid. But we know that in Poe's theorem, this is what it's all about. In Poe's theorem, his victim is there and victim is to be paid once, and then the other side of this is also those who are maybe recreational users, they are to be paid. So the transition is going on between both of these three parties. So post-Pareto actually takes care of Pareto optimality. I've touched upon quite a number of issues in this and the market and the government failures and many of the subsidies, many of the issues and like environmental policies. Environmental subsidies are given and many environmental subsidies go in the name of subsidies, but they become environmental unfriendly subsidies.
Yes, actually there's a lot more to say, but then
Exactly. Environmental unfriendly,
Yes.
particularly in our agricultural sector and maybe industrial sector. So thank you very much, Dr. Mehta. And I now would like to invite Dr. Pradhan. Yeah, Pradhan, your significant contribution in water, right? This is about irrigators and so we would be happy to learn from this.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thank the organizers for considering me. I don't know in which way. I'm neither an economist nor a policy person, but still I'm here. I try to justify my presence by whatever little I can do today. The subject given to me is given to me is the economics of water pollution. Honestly, I had told a doctor that I may not be able to make it because I have some issues at home, but she insisted I have to come. So I tried to put things together. Please bear with me. This is I will just give you an overview where we will see the perspectives of water economics, concerns, where I discuss pollution and economic impacts, water accounting and valuation, integration of water, ecosystem services, and accounting into water pricing and the investment in water. So, it's very basic, but the students are there, so I thought I'll leave it to go by that only. Water economics is a branch of economics which is based on the economic theory of resources and environment and deals with the water resources related problems and challenges in an institutional structure. You've heard a few things and ma'am has mentioned in the morning also about it. Growing water demand, increasing water scarcity and highly variable water availability presents a global water crisis which we all know. Now, we have also discussed, all the previous discussions have said, the supply is scarce, we have supply and demand we have discussed. So now where do we go from here? And why do we need to put a value to water and consider its economic aspects? So first let's see, we need to how water and economics. So ecosystem services, we need to link them with economics and ecological perspectives. Ecosystem services is a concept that bridges the fields of economics and ecology. The contributions of ecosystems to the benefits that are used in economic and other human activities. This is how the UN defines it. Now, ecosystem services, valuation and accounting enable decision makers to better balance current supply and demand with likely increase in future demand and decreases in water availability, thereby deferring and spreading costs over time. It does this by revealing the sources of ecosystem services and their use in the economy. Some definition, the system of environmental economic accounting is the international statistical standard for natural capital accounting that integrates environmental and economic information as per the UN. We still have to go with this. Now, this is just a graphic of what I just read, the environment, the economy, the natural resources, the emissions and waste, and how the various stakeholders are involved in. concerns. What? Nitin. Water pollution in India imposes severe economic burdens, estimated at a significant percentage of GDP, through increased healthcare costs for waterborne diseases, reduced agricultural needs, lost productivity and industrial inefficiency. Exactly what Dr. Mehta has been speaking since morning. With over 2 million people affected by contaminated groundwater in 24 and 2 million tons of sewage released daily, which I think somebody is touching after me, the economical loss stems from treating waterborne disease and repairing ecosystem damage caused by untreated sewage and industrial effluent. Contamination of water bodies by industrial, domestic and agriculture waste acts as a negative externality, creating high social costs that outweigh the private production benefits. Now all these arise from water pollution. These are all the offshoots of water pollution. Where the water bodies get affected and they land up in all these different issues. These are all of us know that the water main causes of water pollution are industrial waste, agricultural runoff, sewage and wastewater, plastic and solid waste, oil spills, mining activities and thermal pollution. Now contamination sources and economic drivers. These are important because this forms the base of the pollution causes. Rapid urbanization, industrial waste and agricultural runoff, especially pesticides, are primary drivers with significant groundwater contamination. Then the next important issue is policy and regulatory challenges. Economic instruments such as pollution taxes have historically not been effectively implemented, which I have seen also because there have been a lot of work. And I see that there are policies, there are rules and regulations, but not implemented, with a reliance on public interest litigation to manage environmental damage. This is what we were talking in the previous elections also. Because nobody is, the producer or the person who is doing it is not responsible unless policy is in place, but no actions are. Unless people come and then the consumers come together and do something in the form of a PI. Economic valuation of clean water is high, yet the market fails to reflect the true cost of pollution, necessitating stronger regulatory mechanisms. Now these are the economic impacts and costs. Health costs, agriculture and industrial losses and pollution control. I am dealing with this in the next thing with reference to India. Impact on growth. Pollution creates a negative externality where upstream industries affect downstream economic activities and ultimately hindering the GDP growth. Industries and urban bodies often do not pay. We've been saying this since morning and it is again coming into my presentation also. Industries and urban bodies often do not pay the full cost of pollution they create, shifting the burden to the public and downstream users. Industry is in somewhere, but its trickling effect is downstream. The remediation costs. Significant investments are needed to rehabilitate polluted rivers, with 351 polluted stretches identified across 323 rivers. So that is the quantum, the magnitude of work that needs to be done. Then Dr. Jain got infrastructure gaps, important. Inadequate wastewater treatment infrastructure is the primary economic bottleneck in managing pollution. While precise aggregate GDP impact figures for water pollution are less documented than air pollution in India, the economic consequences are severe, primarily manifesting lost labor, productivity, treatment expenditures and degraded natural capital. See, that is why it's very difficult for us. If you go through my presentation, till the end you will not see any table, any data, because there is nothing authentic which I can present here. Lot of There, I mean, it's a area where a lot of work needs to be done. Now, when I said I have been touching upon it, these are the direct economic costs. I just mentioned that this is related to us. Health costs, high rates of illness and premature mortality due to water pollution, economic losses. The ripple effects of polluted water can impact individuals, businesses, and governments. One of the most immediate economic costs in the rise in healthcare expenditures, we all know, waterborne diseases, contaminated water, which requires a lot of medical treatment and expenditure incurred because of that. Then agriculture and fishing, which we have been saying, and also mentioned in the morning, agriculture is one of the main things, but contamination reduces agricultural productivity in fish catches, directly affecting rural livelihoods. This is a result of industrialization and development. Tourism. Pollution reduces the economic value of scenic water. Tourism revenue also is taking its toll. Even like we said, both the sides of the coin. Excessive tourism also is taking the demand, the use of water, the misuse of water, the contamination. All these are offshoots of development. So now we need to see how we can account. Now, so if we don't continue to do this, we are heading towards disaster. We need to keep some sort of a check by considering water accounting. Water accounts are a framework for assembling multiple data sources into a coherent information system. Now, there are many types of water accounts covering the hydrological cycle, water quality, the water supply, sewerage industries, water fees and charges, defensive and restoration expenditures, and financing, as well as for water-related ecosystem services like water purification, water regulation, and flood control. So if you see, accounting for water is not an easy thing. Air, in fact, is easier, but water is really difficult. I will be coming to that. Now, the physical accounting, where use a water balance approach to quantify inflows versus outflows, that is precipitation, reverse evaporation, and transportation. Asset accounts track the changes in water stock, surface, groundwater over time. So see, now we say that we are doing groundwater recharge. But do we know what was there before and how much quantity of water has been recharged? But what has precipitated? We know what the supply and use tables quantify the amount of water used by various economic sectors and associated monetary value. This is not being done. There are lots of gaps in water accounting. Frameworks typically now, this system of environmental economic accounting is trying to link physical data into the national accounts like GDP. Now there's this system of environmental economic accounting which is there, just introduced. We should go in for this. This describes three general types of accounts. One is the supply table, where we see the physical and monetary terms, flow of natural inputs, ecosystem services, products, and residuals. Then there's the asset accounts. It could be individual, environmental assets, physical, monetary terms, showing the stock of environmental assets at the beginning and at the end of each accounting period, the change in stock. So if we know today this is done and so much of urbanization is there or industrialization is there or tourism, the consumption basically, then we will know, but we need to have this asset accounts in place. Account recording transactions. Again, see there is so much of scope here about economic activities undertaken for environmental purposes. We are doing it, but where is the data? Where is the transaction? Where is the records? What transactions have taken place? What exchanges have taken place? So water accounting provides information. Why do we need it? It provides information management options related to what we have an account. Only if we know what is there, then we can think of putting a tag to it. So environmental surcharge and scarcity pricing. Now, price inelastic household water demand means that substantial volumetric price increases and reductions in water use. So this is a demand supply situation. The offsetting benefits of higher volumetric prices are that it can be very costly to increase long-term supply, while more radical demand management, example water rationing or restrictions, pose their own welfare costs on households. Again, because it may be acceptable, may not be acceptable, may be priced